Hello everyone and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is the 25th of March and it is a big day in Greek history. Yes, I'm sure many of you will be aware of and potentially be celebrating the fact that today, the 25th of March, is 2021. It's 200 years since 25th of March, 1821, when the Greek War of Independence was in full throw and Greece became independent from the Ottoman Empire. So big celebrations are going on in Greece today. They're really the start of Greece, modern Greece's story, but also the starting point for the real European love affair with Greece and with ancient Greece, and indeed the growth of interest in and love of and respect for systems of ancient political thinking in the ancient Greek world, like the democracy of ancient Athens. It's one of those curious things that actually up until the 1820s and post the 1820s and the Greek War of Independence, ancient Greek democracy was not actually a very positively reputed thing. If you go back to the debates of the founding fathers around the time of the development of the US Constitution, for instance, they know lots about the systems of ancient Athens and indeed ancient Sparta, Thebes, Crete and other parts of the ancient Greek world, but they are not positive about them at all, seeing the direct democracy of ancient Athens at the time more as an example of kind of mob rule. One of the famous quotes from James Madison's Federalist Papers of the time is saying that even if every Athenian citizen had been a Socrates, Athenian democracy would still have been just a mob. And that's why the US Constitution much prefers the Roman Republican model, and that's why the US has a Senate and a capital, not a boule and an agora at the heart of its politics. But it's really after the 1820s when Greece recuperates its independence that we're celebrating today, and starts to become a modern nation in which people from different European and indeed American and other parts of the world countries could now invest time in the archaeology. So very soon after 1821, the Acropolis would become the first archaeological site in Greece and would be cleared of habitation and restored stroke pared back to its 5th century BC golden age, and that would then lead into the rest of the 19th century being an absolute mayhem of archaeological investigation across ancient Greece as European nations fought with one another to have the honour to uncover another aspect of ancient Greece. So we're celebrating that today, and we're also celebrating that was conducted as part of a ceremony in conjunction with the Greek embassy in London today. One of your friends and my friend Paul Cartledge, Professor Paul Cartledge, who has been honoured today by the Greek state. Now, Paul has been given something called an honour called the Taxiarchos tis Timis. So he is the Taxiarch of honour, which is pretty much the highest honour that the Greek state can bestow on an individual for services to both the investigation of ancient Greece and the discovery and its communication around the world. So we send our massive congratulations to Professor Paul Cartledge, now Taxiarch of Honour, and an honorary citizen of Sparta, and kind of also we send our massive congratulations, of course, to Greece today on the 25th of March, celebrating its 200 years since the Greek War of Independence. Now, not to be outdone by this, there are others out there today also celebrating their anniversaries. Venice, you may well be aware as well, is celebrating the 25th of March today, not 200 years, but 1600 years since it claims to have been founded. So it's got a longer history to talk about, but clearly 25th of March, something is in the offing. So I hope you guys are having a great day on the 25th of March and enjoying some of those celebrations, and that you are safe and well. But it's been absolutely fantastic to be able to see, as ever, your brilliant questions that have come in. And we're going to get straight in right now. Steve Lapiraus, I didn't have time to answer this live last time, asked, what kind of structures did an average Greek live in at the time of Plato? And actually a number of you have been asking questions we haven't had a chance to get to over the last couple of weeks, asking about sort of normal everyday life. Going back to another question by Donald Skinner Reed, who's been asking about a book that you can recommend to read about domestic life of the ancient Greeks. So Donald, getting back finally to you, apologies for the delay. I would recommend Robert Garland's Daily Life in the Ancient Greeks. Absolutely brilliant book that really kind of goes in a very kind of alphabetical kind of way. You can use it almost like an index, sort of different things you think of. You can look them up in the index, and there's a short paragraph or two about what we know about how the ancient Greeks dealt with X or Y. And Steve, what kind of structures did they live in? Well, it did vary enormously, of course, depending on wealth. But the traditional sort of Greek house was like the Roman one, sort of based around a courtyard or a garden space. Very, very important to have in the house. And then if they were wealthy enough, they would definitely have an andron, the man's space. That was where the symposium would take place. Walls at the lesser end of the spectrum could be made of anything, sort of mud brick and wood. Small windows, absolutely no glass obviously, but with some sort of shutters perhaps across to keep out of the heat. But most of these houses, no bathrooms whatsoever, unless they were at the very fancy end of the market. There's absolutely no bathrooms. So there we go. Again, it gives you a little bit of a sense of what the Greeks would have been living in. And Donald, do go and have a look at Daily Life of the Ancient Greeks by Robert Garland. Absolutely brilliant. Amy Galbo has been in touch, asking about, she's been listening to a podcast about the history of Rome. And she was saying that on the one hand, the podcast says that for every day a Roman worked, they would get a day off due to religious festivals, observances and games. And that the working day was pretty much over by mid-afternoon. So was this really the case? And she's interpreting this as sort of, was there enough cash sloshing around in the city that ordinary citizens lived the good life, barely worked, and not for long? And you're contrasting this with your sense also of Rome as a place of tenement blocks, of poor living conditions. And Amy, you're absolutely right. We need to try and match these two images together. Now, it's right that both the Greek and the Roman worlds, there were huge numbers of religious festivals. Now, in the Roman world, this was more standardized across the Roman world, but in Greece, every different city-state would have a different set of festivals that they were spending their time involved in. And in fact, actually, the Athenians were renowned for dedicating more days than any other to religious festivals when you couldn't be working. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that they're necessarily, either in the Rome or the Greek case, kind of got enough money to sort of laze around and leisure. It's the fact that they're just not allowed to work because obviously you don't want to offend the gods, and that means you can't earn anything either. So it's not necessarily they've got the money to have the spare time, it's that they're just not allowed to be working and earning on those days. They have to follow the pathway of keeping on the right side of the gods. Now, sometimes these religious festivals did then involve some kind of public magnificence. So back in Athens, for instance, one of the things that happens at the Panathenea, the great Athenian festival, each year is that they supposedly led about 100 cows up to the Acropolis and slaughtered them. Now, 100 cows provides meat for roughly actually 50,000 people, depending on sort of average portion of meat. So pretty much everyone got a nice meat meal as a result of this public festival. That's great. And of course, Aristophanes jokes that one of the best, most well-known after effects of a Athenian or a Greek religious festival was indigestion. So we can see how people did benefit from them, and there was perhaps a bit of a system of giving back, but wasn't necessarily earning them any cash. And then you're talking about kind of the length of the day. Well, don't forget, in both the Greek and the Roman case, once it has gone dark, particularly in the wintertime, then really you've only got flickering candlelight as a way of lighting the way. And that for most people would not have been affordable on large scale. So actually work, certainly out in the fields, was not in any way possible after it had gone dark, or indeed, as you point out, during the intense heat of the summer. So again, it's not that they don't want to, that they have so much money sloshing around that they can take the afternoon off. It's that simply it's not possible to undertake the work in any kind of safe way. And you're absolutely right that for the average Roman in Rome, the experience was not a nice one. We do think about Rome, first city of 1 million people, as a city of tenement blocks, huge storied apartment blocks where the conditions were disgusting. You definitely didn't want the penthouse apartment. We have ancient writers telling us about how they were infested with rats and mice and leaking roofs and kind of the grime, and people were packed into small blocks. And fire was a massive problem because the ground floor of all these tenement blocks would often be given over to restaurants and shops which had open fires and flames. The tenement buildings would be very very, very close together. So one fire from one building could easily spread to another. It was not a pleasant set of conditions in any way, shape or form. So Amy, I think we have to bring these two pictures together of a short work opportunity during the day and of not a huge number of kind of days in which to do it, leaving people actually pretty strapped and in some pretty appalling conditions for living. So Amy, thank you so much for your question. As ever, do get in touch with your questions. You can send your questions in through the Facebook page or through email, michaelscottacademic@gmail.com, or you can ask them live here on the chat on the live video, and we'll hopefully be able to pick them up as we go, or if not, then I will get round to them next time. So Vittoria, Vitelli and Mikeni had also been asking, and this was in relation to talking about the different colours used at Pompeii, and particularly the different colours of red being used in the paintings and frescoes at Pompeii. Vittoria was asking about what is Realgar and what is lac. And now these are really both interesting bases for creating colour in the ancient world. So colours could be made in the ancient world, and dating back to the earliest eras of cave paintings, if we go further back in human history, are made out of principally three different methods. Small amount of colours are actually made kind of animal-based, out of animal-based things. So Tyrian purple is a famous example. What animal is that, you might ask? Well, Tyrian purple in the Roman world was actually made taking a sea snail called the murex sea snail and squeezing a particular gland kind of within the sea snail, which produced a few precious drops of a liquid that when it was treated and when you then put a material in it, it dyed the material a rich, radiant purple. And this was the most expensive colour in antiquity to make, because it took, to make an ounce of purple cloth, purple coloured cloth, you needed something like 10,000 sea snails. Right? So there's a colour made from animal. Then you could also make colours from plants. Right? So we know, for instance, that things like woad was used, crocus, saffron to make yellow, pomegranate rind also used to make yellow colour. So lots of different colours made from plant extracts. And then there was the third category, which is from minerals, and that's where you take kind of rocks, if you like, of different kinds of mineral ores, and you grind them down and you add them into a liquid of some kind that acts as some kind of fixer for the colour, so that you can then use it as a paint. And that is what Realgar is. It's an ore. Now, Realgar is actually otherwise known as ruby sulfur, and it's a pretty nasty ore to have to deal with, and certainly to do any kind of grinding down and mixing with, because it's a minor ore of arsenic. And so it is to be avoided at all costs. And in fact, it's not used anywhere at all anymore. It's renowned carcinogenic as well as being poisonous. But in the ancient Roman world, it was a great way of making a very nice red colour. So Realgar was used to create a nice red colour. And then lac, well, some of you may find there's even more kind of off-putting than the minor ore of arsenic, because lac is basically a goo that's secreted by insects. Right. So it's an insect secretion that kind of, when dried and flaked and then kind of broken down and mixed, can produce a nice kind of scarlety colour. So you could be looking at your walls in ancient Rome and you could be thinking, oh yes, the beautiful crimson ruby red of arsenic, or you could be thinking about the beautiful scarlet red of the insect secretion alongside your saffron yellow, or your pomegranate grind yellow, or your woad, or indeed while sitting there while wearing your Tyrian purple made of thousands upon thousands of sea snails. So there you go. And colours, of course, very importantly in the ancient world, because they came from particular materials, mineral, plant, animal, often carried with them associations of their origin. So particularly saffron, obviously with yellow coming from a beautiful plant, has all these connotations of youth and beauty, and of effervescence and of growth and of bloom, for instance. So kind of you see all these interesting connotations that actually come from the place or the material that originally gave the colour. So Victoria, thank you so much for that great question. Absolutely brilliant. We have got time, I think, for one more before we jump into kind of the things of what's going on in the ancient world. And I wanted to, well, we could actually bring this one in. Naomi Williams has been asking about, can we do a programme about Pompeii and Herculaneum? We'd love to see your thoughts. Well, bless you, Naomi. That's very, very kind indeed. And yeah, I'd love to get on, do another programme about Herculaneum and Pompeii. So we did a little bit, particularly about Herculaneum, when we were looking at invisible cities, ancient invisible cities, and we looked, it was Italy's invisible cities actually, wasn't it? And it was the Naples programme when we were looking particularly at Herculaneum and in Pompeii. But you're right, it'd be absolutely brilliant to go back there again, not least because of the extraordinary things that have been coming out of the new excavations there in the so-called area Regio 5, the kind of the last major area of Pompeii to be excavated. And many of you will be captivated, as I was, by the chariot find that they've recently showed off. An entire chariot, kind of in its entirety, that has been painstakingly uncovered and brought back to life. I think it'd be absolutely brilliant to get back in there with some of the latest finds. So Naomi, absolutely, I hope so too. Fingers crossed that we can get in with that soon enough. Okay, so we have to have a quick think about all the great stuff that's in the news about the ancient world, as well as some of the things that are going on that you might like to take advantage of. So what have we got coming up soon? There's lots of things going on, and many of these obviously have been flagged on the Facebook page as well, and all the links will be there, and we'll be pointing them out. But some of the things that I've enjoyed the most, the magnificent Roman aqueduct on Lesvos is going to get a facelift. So this is a Roman aqueduct in the area of Moria on Lesvos. It's going to be cleaned, fenced in, and the land will be expropriated to protect it. It's a 2nd or 3rd century AD aqueduct that was built to transport water from the sources at Olympos to the ancient town of Mytilene. Over 28 kilometres. Absolutely brilliant indeed. Now, I just want to check in case Facebook has changed some of the settings here, because I am not seeing any of your comments coming up as I normally do this week. I'm seeing kind of who's watching and who's tuning in, but I'm not seeing any comments. Now, this might be because you're kind of everyone needs a break before Easter and you're all quiet this week, but it may also be because Facebook have changed their settings or something. So I am not seeing your comments at the moment if you're making them. Please do make a comment or two just to let me know whether or not it's a Facebook glitch that I need to sort out. But otherwise, be warned that I'm not responding to comments as they come up, because at the moment I cannot see them at all. So we'll carry on though for the moment with the kind of news about the ancient world. What about this stone anchors in the River Wear could reveal a Roman port? So a trove of Roman artefacts have been uncovered in the River Wear, which is up near Sunderland, and it includes 5 stone anchors. Theory is to be that this could have been home to a small port. And underwater archaeologist Gary Bankhead says, we can't overemphasize the importance of the discovery. It could be only the 2nd such port ever to be discovered in Britain. Absolutely brilliant. And then the oldest recipe, if you guys have been experimenting with home cooking over the lockdowns, I know I have a lot more than usual. Oldest recipe found in Egypt to be written in Greek. So the oldest written recipe found in Egypt dates to approximately the year 300 AD, and it's a recipe for a red lentil stew. I'm not so sure if I'm that excited about it quite so much. Now, it was written on papyrus, Greek language, and this is the oldest known recipe to have been recovered in Egypt. Absolutely brilliant. So if you fancy some red lentil stew, you can now make it, being assured that it is a tried and tested recipe that they've been making since 300 AD. Back in the UK, Lincolnshire's 1700-year-old Roman walls are finally going to be conserved after a new project. So finally, they're going to be conserved thanks to funding from Historic England. And these walls around Lincolnshire are the best preserved standing Roman ruins in the country outside of Lincoln. And it's been on Historic England's Heritage at Risk list since the list was first compiled in 1998. So there we go. We have finally got there to protect those walls. That's absolutely brilliant. And then we must think also about what's on and what's coming up. So if you fancy your Athenian inscriptions, teachers out there, I absolutely try and encourage my students at every possible moment to use an inscription or two in their studies, i.e. the stone chipped messages and texts that have been left for us by the ancient Greeks and Romans as an absolutely vital evidence to contrast and also to kind of complement the remaining literary sources of the histories and the dramas and the plays, etc. But ancient Athenian inscriptions in UK collections, so a session on the 5th of June between 10 and 4 p.m. is going to be run about ancient Athenian inscriptions in UK collections. And this is going to be, it's done by the Classical Association Teaching Board in association with Classics for All and the British School at Athens, led by Dr. Peter Little. Absolutely brilliant. And it's going to be of relevance to all teachers, Key Stage 1, 2, 3, GCSE, A-level, Class of Ancient History. There's going to be something for everyone in this mix. So that looks like an absolutely brilliant day to be a part of. Very small cost of £5 to join in that. Then there are some great podcasts out there at the moment. History Hit, I've got a huge run of podcasts about the ancient world, but if I can pick out one, it's the defeat of Rome, Crassus, and the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE, which it looks absolutely brilliant. And that was also famously the battle when Romans first ever set eyes on silk. Silk banners of the enemy were flying in the air. Romans had never seen this material before, and it absolutely struck fear into their hearts of what other kind of mysteries the enemy might have waiting for them. Then also you can catch up with BBC4 Radio 4 in our time. They did the Bacchae. There was a brilliant discussion with Melvin Bragg and guests about the Bacchae that you can catch up with. So that looks great fun. And then the other thing that I wanted to flag with you, which I think we've put out on the Facebook page, but if not, we will put out a link to it very soon. The team at Bristol, led by Esther, now a great friend, is working on and has just released their virtual Oracle consultation experience. So they've been working on this brilliant project for the Oracle at Dodona up in northern Greece, which was a very weird, different type of Oracle experience than you're probably imagining. You went in and you sort of asked your question to priests who listened to a sacred tree, and they listened potentially to the rustling of the leaves in the sacred tree, and were potentially then gave you a response to your question, but you had to first write down your question on a metal lead tablet and bury it into the ground under your tree, and under the magic tree, and you got a sort of yes or no answer. Anyway, absolutely brilliant. And they've created a virtual reality experience of going to consult the Oracle so that you can have the joy of doing it too. So get in there, get stuck in with the virtual oracular consultation at Dodona, organised by the University of Bristol. Going to be absolutely brilliant. Okay, so we've got time. We've got time for a few more questions coming up. I'm going to try and press this just in case this gives us no comments. No, that doesn't give you the comments either. So we will go through to, where are we going to next? We are going to Chantal. Chantal Brion has asked about, in the plagues of antiquity, just as things have drastically changed in this one, there's no flying, there's no travelling to other countries, no large public gatherings, etc. What fundamental changes were there back then in the plagues of antiquity? Well, there were a number of plagues in antiquity. Famously in Athens during the Peloponnesian War, the Great Plague that beset the city of Athens, which kind of pretty much decimated the population. Half, probably, male adult citizens died of the plague. And obviously what had caused the plague was the fact that the entire population of Attica was encouraged to squeeze inside the city walls of Athens. So you had very, very, very high population squeezed into a small area inside city walls that were under siege. Perfect conditions for plague to spread like wildfire. And people were desperately trying to work out how to deal with it without any real sense, obviously, of the medical kind of knowledge behind it. And one of the things they did as a result when it finally started to ebb was actually introduce a new god. So a new god, Asclepius, who had been well known in the other parts of Greece, but actually had not up to that point in time been worshipped in the city of Athens with his own temple, was introduced into the city, given his own temple in a very strategic spot just under the Parthenon on the Acropolis, and it was hoped that Asclepius, now officially having a home there, wouldn't let a plague like that take place again. But when we see in the Roman era the great Antonine plagues and then later on the Justinian plagues hit, we do see trade being absolutely affected and the world contracting, very much like we've seen it today. Trade interactions over the ancient Silk Roads contracting and even stopping for a period of up to about 30 years. And one of the kind of things that people suggest we might learn, although we probably don't want to hear this from the plagues of antiquity, particularly the Justinian plague, was that was really the first of a series of waves of plague that went backwards and forwards between East and West over hundreds of years afterwards, all related to one another. So kind of, although obviously they were not operating in the world of vaccines as we thankfully are today, there are certainly lessons to be learned from how the ancients dealt with their plague. And then we had a question also from Catherine Nancy, who's asking about, with new technologies, what, if any, clues are there of places or civilizations that we've never been aware of previously? Absolutely brilliant question, Catherine. Really, really enjoying this. So one of the things I'm writing about at the moment for this new book called X Marks the Spot that we're doing with Hoddesdon is about discoveries. And one of the examples that we're having in this book is about the island of Keros in the Aegean. Now, Keros, you won't have heard of it. It's an uninhabited island today. It's one of the largest uninhabited islands in the Cyclades. And it has been uninhabited, permanently uninhabited since about the 1970s, but even stretching back into the 19th and 18th centuries, it had a paltry population and was actually owned for a long period of time by the larger nearby island of Amorgos. The monastery on Amorgos owned it and used it as sheep pasture. And Keros, in fact, throughout most of the classical period of ancient history and even into the Hellenistic world and the Roman world, never did anything important whatsoever. Pretty much the only reference to Keros in the ancient texts is that in one particular year it was paying a paltry sum in tax to be part of the Athenian Empire. Really not a place that we would say changed the world. But if new excavations on Keros that have been led by the Cambridge Keros team, Professor Colin Renfrew and now Dr. Michael Boyd, have over the last decade or so been uncovering an extraordinary era in Keros' story, not in the classical world, but in what has been termed prehistorical times, i.e. in the Bronze Age, and particularly in the early Bronze Age. Now that means the 3rd millennium BCE. That's the period around 2000, from 3000 BC through to 2000 BC. But Keros' kind of heyday seems to have been between about 2750 BC and 2300 BCE. Now this story has come to light very, very slowly because they initially were attracted to the island because of looting and seeing looters had discovered a rich deposit of marble figurines, of Cycladic figurines, which they looted. And then slowly over time, they've been able to undertake more excavations in undisturbed areas of the island and then bring to bear on those new excavations some of the latest technologies. And in this particular case, it's been two forms of technology that have really uncovered the extraordinary story of Keros. On the one hand, they've gone small. Right? They want to know all the tiniest bits of evidence that would normally get lost in an excavation. And so they have been undertaking studies in which they sieve the earth. You're doing a process of water sieving, so you get rid of the earth, but leaving all the tiny little flecks of, could be things like human teeth, but it could be grains, seeds, all of these petrified tiny things that still survive. And if we can just get our hands on them, we can then analyze them using microscopes, etc., to be able to tell a whole range of things about who was there, what their diet was, what kind of levels of agriculture, what sort of permanent size of population are we talking about, etc. So on the one hand, they've been going small and then bringing all the new technologies to bear to really uncover the daily life of people in the 3rd millennium BC on Keros. But then the other thing they've been doing, again with microscopes, and this is particularly what's known as petrological analysis. So they've been looking at the actual materials of the figurines, the marble, the pottery, and looking at it in stunning detail to then be able to work out where the raw materials have come from that these finds are made of. And what that has uncovered is an extraordinary fact about Keros, that none of the stuff on Keros came from Keros. In fact, it comes from a wide range across the Aegean, from mainland Greece as well as from other Cycladic islands, although nothing from Crete. And so we've got this picture of Keros in the early Bronze Age that's emerging, of an island that in the rest of kind of more recent history, if you like, has done nothing important whatsoever. But in the 3rd millennium BC, Keros is now appearing as the earliest maritime sanctuary known in the world, the earliest kind of community ritual congregation site in the Cyclades. And then, as a result of all this, they start building buildings on Keros in this period, marble buildings, with the marble coming from the nearby island of Naxos. But to bring that much marble, 10,000 tons of it, they estimate, would have required something like 3,500 sea journeys, crossing 40,000 nautical miles. And so it ends up being the largest kind of maritime sea construction operational known in the entirety of the area. So Keros, thanks to these kind of revolutionary new techniques, has absolutely brilliantly been uncovered to have been the star of the early Bronze Age, and then to have very much peaked and to have fallen into kind of unknown and unused territory for the rest of history. But we are bringing back that story, and that will be one of the stories in X Marks the Spot. So hold on to your hats for when that book comes out. Although you've got a little while to hold on. It'll be 2023 when the book is published. Okay, we are out of time. Thank you so much indeed for all your questions. It's been absolutely brilliant to be able to answer your questions today, and hopefully we'll get this issue fixed of people commenting, as nothing's come up on my screen, so I'll need to have a look at that. And thank you. I'm sorry if we haven't got to your question this week. We will next time, I promise. Now, when is next time? We are going to be taking a bit of a break, as it's exciting times coming up over the next couple of weeks. I am turning 40. Oh dear, on the 3rd of April. Yes, it's going to be quite a lockdown birthday, kind of the big 40 for me. But then also very, very honoured to be receiving the Classical Association Prize on the 7th of April. So that is a virtual event. You can tune in for free to see Natalie Haynes giving me this award, as well as giving awards to a very, very well-deserving range of school teachers who have also won the first inaugural round of Classical Association Teacher Awards. And they've done absolutely brilliantly, and what a fantastic bunch they are. So tune in to see them and me receive our awards on the 7th. But then we will be back for our next Q&A on the 22nd of April. So after the Easter break. Hope you have a safe Easter break, but 5 p.m. on the 22nd of April. I will see you all then and look forward to it. But in the meantime, stay safe and take care.